Could several former WWE superstars be set to leave All Elite Wrestling and rejoin WWE in the near future? We'll let you know of some names that could be set to return to their former employer in this countdown video. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of stories to get into, and in today's countdown video, we're going to be looking at some names that used to work for WWE, used to be a WWE superstar, subsequently left the company for various reasons, joined All Elite Wrestling, and currently members, or at least for one of them, used to be a member of the AEW roster, but could be set to rejoin WWE either in the imminent or distant future. If you like these videos, be sure to get involved in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right hand corner. As you can see right there, we are less than 300 subscribers to go until 20,000 subscribers, a major milestone for the channel. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, get involved. Remember, you can join the WN365 roster by clicking that join button. You get your badges, your emojis, and your exclusive members-only content such as gaming streams, which are coming soon exclusively for members. So let's get into this which former WWE superstars currently work for AEW could be set to return to Triple H and Nick Khan's promotion. Let's begin with a pretty obvious one, that being former AEW Women's World Champion and former WWE Divas Champion Saraya, of course known in WWE as Paige. Now I say this one's an obvious one because Saraya is the only name on this list that actually, as of right now, is no longer All Elite. At the time of recording this video, one of the big stories over the last week or so has been Saraya's departure from AEW. She made the announcement on the debut episode of her podcast series, announcing that after around 2.5 years with All Elite Wrestling, she had fulfilled her obligations and had left the company, or at least acquired an early release from her contract with the company. During Saraya's time in AEW, of course, she came to the company at the Grand Slam edition of AEW Dynamite in 2022. She was then subsequently cleared to make an in-ring return. She hadn't wrestled at that point for over 2 years, close to actually 3 years, maybe even longer than that. I mean, the retirement was in, 2017, her last match was, so it was around sort of 5 years, actually, at the time she hadn't wrestled. And she came back, worked the match against Britt Baker at Full Gear later on that year, and then, of course, subsequently wrestled several matches for AEW, culminating in winning the AEW Women's World Championship at AEW All In back in 2023 in her home country of England. But some had suggested that maybe Saraya didn't have the best booking in AEW. She was part of the Outcast faction, and even herself, she kind of admitted one of the reasons why she actually decided to leave AEW, was looking to leave AEW, is she just felt like she just didn't really fit in the company anymore. And maybe her style of wrestling wasn't in keeping with the way that AEW presents their women's division. She kind of always felt like a WWE superstar in AEW, and that's not a negative or a positive. It just feels someone that maybe couldn't make the adjustment or was just kind of a little bit out of place. Now, we know, of course, Saraya, she's not exactly an old superstar. She's been around for quite a long time, obviously debuting when she was just, in her teens back in her home country of England, but also when she signed with WWE, she was still in her teens. I think she actually went on the road when she was like 21 with WWE, I believe, on the main roster, just going to show that, again, she's been around for quite some time and is still relatively young. But we know her health problems. We know, of course, she was forced to retire from in 2017, 2018 because of her neck issues. She's had multiple neck surgeries, and for the longest time, she couldn't get cleared. She was forced into early retirement. But just because she's had those neck issues and because now she's been cleared by AEW doesn't mean that she would get cleared by WWE. Well, it feels like the answer is yes. When she signed with AEW, she did subsequently reach out and actually say on social media to several outlets that, yes, she was actually asked by WWE. This was around the time that she did get released and her contract expired. She was asked by Triple H about possibly re-signing with the company. This was post Vince McMahon exit in 2022. If she wanted to rejoin the company, and WWE would look into seeing if she could get cleared to wrestle again. And if she could get cleared to wrestle again, then they would build around that and maybe have a bit of a limited wrestling schedule, etc., etc. So even prior to joining AEW, there were pitches, there were discussions about Paige actually wrestling again for World Wrestling Entertainment. Now, obviously, because of her shelf life, of having the bad neck, it's limited, and she's not going to be in pro wrestling for the next decade or longer. It may only be a couple of years. It makes one think that Saraya, Paige, you would think it's likely to go back to WWE at some point, have, even if it's just one match to kind of round out her career. That would make sense, considering it is the place where she made her name, and she was a early trailblazer in the women's revolution, whatever you want to call it, in WWE. There have been rumors that coming up later this year, the Evolution pay-per-view is set to return. Is that going to be a good place for Paige to possibly come back and wrestle at an all-female pay-per-view? It would make sense. So this one, to me, I think is very likely to happen. What are your thoughts? Could we see Paige back inside of a WWE ring now, of course, that she has left AEW? Let's move on and talk about WWE Hall of Famer, good old JR Jim Ross. Now, Jim Ross, of course, he's been in professional wrestling, as he mentions, for over 50 years. The guy is a legend. He's an icon. He's a WWE Hall of Famer. He's arguably the greatest commentator of all time. Certainly, when you talk about the voices of professional wrestling and the voice of WWE for so long, you think about Jim Ross. And obviously, in the sort of modern era, you think about Michael Cole. He was the men that followed Jim Ross and for many years got criticized because he wasn't Jim Ross, because Jim Ross was just that good. When you think about some of the iconic moments throughout WWE history, it's Jim Ross who's calling it. He provides the lyrics, he provides the music to some of the greatest moments in professional wrestling history. Now, since the formation of AEW back in 2019, Jim Ross has commentating on some of AEW's biggest moments. Initially, he was a full-time broadcaster covering all of the AEW pay-per-views and covering all of the early episodes of AEW Dynamite. But over the last few years, as JR has battled health issues, a variety of different health issues, he has scaled back his commitments to AEW. He is still under contract, and every year there's discussions about whether this is going to be his last contract, if he's going to stay on, if he's not going to stay on. Now, you occasionally hear from Jim Ross, mainly during pay-per-views for big matches, main events, middle of the show matches, so he still does call 2, 3, 4 matches a month, possibly for AEW, largely when they want him to come in and if the match is big enough for him to come in. Around, as I mentioned, next year, we'll probably have a conversation once more about his contract coming up in AEW. Now, he's been open to suggest that he's more than happy to retire in AEW, and he's more than happy to finish up his career in AEW, and any return to WWE would certainly not be a full-time return or anything like that. But you just think that given his association with WWE and given the fans in WWE that he has in positions of power, I think about Paul Levesque, Triple H here, is it impossible that we have Jim Ross call one last match in WWE? I don't think it is. Now, Jim Ross is not the announcer that he was in the 1990s. During his time in AEW, particularly in more recent years, towards the end of his full-time run, he was making commentary gaffes and mistakes, calling it WWE Dynamite or getting names wrong or saying certain things, and people said, well, this isn't the JR that it used to be, but it's still Jim Ross. He still has credibility, and when you hear his voice, it is still so iconic. There is weight to it, and it does make situations feel bigger and feel more impactful and feel like the moment is even bigger. So he can still lend that, and there was a period of time towards the end of The Undertaker's WWE career, which involved matches against Triple H. Jim Ross was called in specifically to call those matches. So I don't think it's impossible once JR's contract is up with AEW that he could make a return to WWE at some point, even if it's just to call one final match. So I don't think that one can be ruled out either. Now, Buddy Matthews. Now, this is a name that many people, ever since really Triple H took creative control of WWE back in 2022 following the Vince McMahon scandal, that people just assumed was going to go back to WWE at some point. Buddy Matthews was one of those names back in, was it 2021, 2022, when he was released by WWE. It was a surprise, not necessarily that he was released because WWE was releasing a lot of names at the time. He didn't go to AEW immediately. A lot of people expected him to go to AEW immediately, but once he did, he was aligned with the House of Black, Malachi Black, Brody King, later Julia Hart as well. And he was one of those names that, because Triple H was quite influential in the cruiserweight division in WWE, and of course, he was a former cruiserweight champion in WWE 205 Live. And of course, Buddy Matthews did get a push when Paul Heyman was the executive director of Monday Night Raw from sort of 2019 into 2020. Some did think this meant that actually, if Buddy Matthews did go back to WWE, he would have advocates in positions of power, namely Triple H, namely Paul Heyman, who's very involved with creative too. So he's always felt like, well, he's a WWE guy. But recently, this year, it was confirmed that either Buddy Matthews had signed a new contract, or there was time added onto his contract, or there were option years that were picked up by AEW. So it doesn't look like that the former World Trios champion Buddy Matthews is going to be going back to WWE anytime soon. But one does kind of feel that when his contract eventually does come up with AEW, it feels like he might follow Malachi Black back to WWE. Of course, we know that Malachi Black, at the time recording this video, is still yet to re-debut on WWE television, but he is gone from AEW. His contract expired earlier this year. The vignettes have already begun airing on SmackDown for the former NXT champion to return to television, so it's just a matter of time before Black is back. And when it comes to Buddy Matthews too, Buddy Matthews, similarly to Malachi Black, his wife is in WWE. His wife is Rhea Ripley, the same way that Malachi Black's wife is Zelina Vega, and Malachi Black's coming back to WWE, going to be on the SmackDown brand alongside Zelina Vega. Many have thought and assumed that because Rhea Ripley is in WWE, and Rhea Ripley is one of the most popular, over, and profitable WWE superstars of any gender on the roster, that Buddy Matthews would have an in and he could get his way back to WWE if he wanted to. So whilst this one doesn't feel like imminently, i.e. maybe even this year, it does feel like eventually we might see Buddy Matthews back in World Wrestling Entertainment. However, you could see a situation now with the exit of Malachi Black and Buddy Matthews once he gets back from injury. He was injured at the Grand Slam AEW Grand Slam show in Australia recently, where he had his match against Kazuchika Okada for the AEW Continental Championship. There is a kind of feeling, isn't there, that maybe when he comes back to AEW TV after the injury, he might have a good singles run, and hey, you never know, he might actually carve out a path for himself in AEW. But there is something in me that just thinks, I think Buddy Matthews might eventually be working his way back to WWE. Now, what about Adam Cole? Now, this one, again, might be one for sort of the future. It might seem a little bit, I know, less likely. It will be interesting to know what you guys think about this one. Adam Cole's certainly a curious one. Now, Adam Cole, the reason why I'm even really entertaining this one is because there have been changes when it comes to Adam Cole. There have been changes when it comes to really his circumstances, shall we call it, in AEW. Namely the fact that, of course, that when Adam Cole first came in, he was one of those names. He wasn't released by WWE. This is the important thing. Some of these names we're talking about in this video were released by WWE, and they didn't want to go back. They never wanted to go back. It was Adam Cole's decision to leave the company back in 2021. His contract was coming up. He'd never been on the main roster. It was a situation whereby, because he'd never been on the main roster, it was a time when these names that had been in NXT for such a long period of time, they basically had the decision of, right, are you going to go to the main roster like Tommaso Ciampa, or are you going to get released? Whether it be like anyone you can possibly think about at the time, there were quite a few, let's say like Samoa Joe or something like that. And Adam Cole ultimately decided that he wanted to go to AEW. He didn't want to go to the WWE main roster. He didn't want to, again, really be involved with the main roster. There were rumors of Keith Lee's manager being pitched at the time and what have you, and this was a time where Adam Cole, of course, had friends in AEW like Kenny Omega, like the Elite, like the Young Bucks, etc., etc., and it felt like a better fit for the former Ring of Honor World Champion, so he came to AEW. He's one of the names, of course, that debuted at AEW All Out in the sort of two debut ending to All Out with himself and Bryan Danielson, and many thought, well, this guy's going to be a future world champion in AEW. Now, as of right now, Adam Cole's still yet to win any championship gold in All Elite Wrestling, which is quite a big surprise, isn't it? But the reason why I say this one could be possible and it could change in the future is because, as we spoke about previously, Triple H is a massive fan of Adam Cole. He's a huge fan. When Triple H was in charge of NXT during the Black and Gold era of that brand, it was built around Adam Cole for a long period of time. Adam Cole was the longest reigning NXT champion in that brand's history. He was the person who was carrying the Black and Gold brand on his back. He was the first Grand Slam champion, if I recall correctly. He was the inaugural NXT North American champion. Triple H and Shawn Michaels were just the biggest fans of Adam Cole. And there was one consideration about him going to AEW as well. At the time, he was working with his fiancée, Britt Baker. Now, their relationship status has changed. They're no longer together. Maybe it might be a situation where going back to WWE, where he knows he's going to be creatively protected and not creatively thrown to the wolves by, like he was probably going to be under Vince McMahon. He's going to be creatively protected and is going to be someone he trusts in Triple H running the situation over there. and he could get his big chance on the main roster, and there aren't as many ties keeping him in AEW as there was previously. Now, this one could still be unlikely because Adam Cole's actually been on the record several times stating he wants to retire in AEW, and he actually has no interest in leaving the company. He respects Tony Khan. He's very close with Tony Khan. He's been shown huge amounts of faith by Tony Khan in the sense that their biggest ever show, AEW's biggest ever show, disputed, but one of the biggest gates ever in professional wrestling in terms of attendance, AEW All In 2023, that was built around Adam Cole versus MJF. He main evented AEW's biggest show ever. That's a lot of faith to be put in by the AEW CEO and president Tony Khan. But in other parts, Adam Cole's AEW run hasn't always gone to plan. He's had some big injuries. He had the concussion where he was out for nearly a year. Of course, he had the broken foot where he was out for nearly a year. So it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. Adam Cole might not even leave AEW, and he's got a lot of injury time to be added onto his contract as well. But I think this is just one name that can't necessarily totally be ruled out because of the connections he has back to WWE, and because he's a talent still that will be sought after in World Wrestling Entertainment. Now, speaking of talents that have connections to WWE, Samoa Joe. Now, Samoa Joe's story in WWE initially was a fascinating one, wasn't it, of course? He was the first real name during the NXT Black and Gold days to jump from TNA to WWE NXT, and was a name when NXT kind of moved away from being just a developmental brand from being like a super indie, and they really started to bring in a lot of these names from the independent scene that were famous from being on the indie scene, and it was quite surprising, and it was like, oh wow, Samoa Joe's in, and he was a name that had been in Ring of Honor and TNA for such a long period of time that people thought there's just no way that he's going to be given a chance in WWE, and of course that's what happened. He did get a chance in WWE. He was put in to not only be a two-time NXT champion, but he went to the main roster, debuted involved in the feud with Seth Rollins and Triple H, and he won pretty much every championship on the main roster apart from a world title. Even had a Universal Championship match against Brock Lesnar. So when he was having the concussion issues, he had a wellness violation as well, that he was on commentary. Everything he did in WWE, he really succeeded at. So when he got the injuries and eventually he got released, he was, of course, the name that got released, then came back almost immediately to WWE in a bit of a power struggle between Triple H and Vince McMahon, and he was put in NXT, and then he was going to be a coach and also a wrestler. Wrestled only, was it one match against Karrion Kross that we saw, and then he was released again. And then, of course, eventually he signed with AEW, and in AEW he's had a very successful run. He has been the AEW World Champion. He's been a TNT Champion. He has been a Ring of Honor World Television Champion, breaking the record for the length of time he held that championship. Tony Khan, obviously, is a massive, massive fan of Samoa Joe. Now, when it comes to him, is there a lot left to do in AEW currently at the time of recording? He isn't doing too much. He's part of the Ops with Hook and Katsuyori Shibata. Given his relationship with the likes of Triple H, with the likes of Paul Heyman, with the likes of William Regal, you do feel like if his contract was to come up, he could be interested in going back to WWE. Could his body even take going back to WWE full-time? WWE doesn't necessarily have a full-time schedule anymore. They don't run as many house shows as they used to. And as we saw, Samoa Joe absolutely can be something that can, work behind the scenes as a coach, as a producer, something like that as well. So this is one that would be interesting to see what Joe would want to do. He's always been treated well and booked well in AEW, but Triple H was also a big, big fan and a big, big advocate for Joe. So when his contract does come up, could the former WWE United States Champion find his way back to Triple H's company? And finally, Mercedes Moné. Now, this one, you might say, Owen, Mercedes Moné hasn't even lost a match in AEW. She is one of the highest paid stars in All Elite Wrestling. She's one of the highest paid female stars in all of professional wrestling. And when her contract with New Japan Pro Wrestling, Bushiroad, to do Stardom and New Japan matches expired, and we knew that there was a bit of a bidding war between AEW and WWE, AEW, they won that race because they blew WWE out of the water when it came to finances, when it came to money for Moné. And since then, she's not lost a match. She's currently holds the TBS Championship. At the time of recording, she's held it for close to a year, and it doesn't look like she's going to drop it anytime soon. And in fairness, whilst there have been significant and legitimate criticisms of maybe her promo work and her character and the writing of her in AEW, certainly recently her matches have been absolutely fantastic, and it felt like she's started to find her her groove. But even when she just came into AEW, she was already talking about, I know I'll go back to WWE. I know I'll go back there one day. I know I'll go back. So many have thought that this could just be a pit stop for Mercedes Moné. And once her contract's up in AEW, she'll want to be proving her worth like she thinks that she's doing now. And then ultimately make her way back to WWE, where it's a different place than when she left in 2022. She fell out with Vince McMahon and John Laurinaitis. They're both not there over the booking of the women's division. There could certainly be an argument and debate of, has the booking of the women's division even got any better since she left WWE? Well, that's certainly a debate that's worth having maybe for a later date, but given the connections of WWE to Endeavor, TKO Group Holdings, of course, when it comes to Endeavor's representation of people in Hollywood, outside projects, it certainly could be something that would interest Mercedes Moné, and I think a lot of people do expect at some point the former Sasha Banks to return to the place that made her famous. So certainly she could be a former WWE superstar that leaves AEW eventually and returns back to WWE. So there you go, guys. There are some names that are currently ex-WWE stars in AEW that could be set to find their way back to World Wrestling Entertainment. What do you think of those names? Which ones do you think are likely, unlikely? Have I missed any names off the list? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. As I mentioned, be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. As you can see, we're less than 300 subscribers away from 20,000 subscribers, which would be a massive milestone for this channel. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. More daily news videos coming, more countdown videos like this coming. We've got live watch-alongs and post-shows for a lot of the events coming up on the road to WrestleMania and beyond for the remainder of the year too. Some really exciting stuff planned, and you can join the WN365 roster. All you have to do is click the join button, links in the video description. You get your badges, your emojis, and your exclusive members-only content as well. Appreciate everyone for tuning in, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.